There are lives that pass quietly, without leaving much of a mark. And then there are lives that crash into history like a lightning bolt, lives that bend culture, rewrite the rules, and create ripples felt across generations. Taylor Swift's life is one such phenomenon. Hers is not merely the story of a musician, but the story of a girl who turned her diary into anthems for the world, who transformed heartbreak into history, and who, against all odds, carved her name into the very DNA of modern music. But how did a shy girl from a small town in Pennsylvania rise to become the defining voice of her generation? How did she fight through rejection, humiliation, betrayal, and an industry designed to control her, only to emerge as one of the most powerful artists on the planet? Today we journey into the untold story, the hidden struggles, the controversial turns, and the defining moments that made Taylor Swift not just a star, but a force of nature. The early spark. Taylor Allison Swift was born on December 13, 1989, in Reading, Pennsylvania, a date that would later become a symbol of her identity, her infamous number 13. Some call it unlucky, but for Taylor, it became a charm, a quiet rebellion against superstition, and a reminder that she was different. Her childhood wasn't drenched in glamour. She grew up on a Christmas tree farm, yes, literally among pine trees and winter scents, an upbringing that may seem whimsical, but it also taught her about patience, resilience, and hard work. In interviews years later, she would recall how the farm life instilled in her a sense of rhythm with nature, of seasons and cycles, ideas that would unknowingly seep into her music. But behind the innocence of farm life, there was a restless spirit inside her. By the time she was 10, she was performing at local fairs, coffee shops, and community events. She wasn't the best singer yet, not the most polished performer, but she had something raw, something magnetic. Her parents, especially her mother Andrea, noticed it. They knew this wasn't a hobby. This was destiny trying to break through. The first rejections. But destiny rarely comes gift-wrapped. Taylor, armed with a demo tape, began knocking on doors in Nashville, the beating heart of country music, at just 11 years old. Imagine it, a little girl, barely in middle school, walking into record labels, begging executives to give her music a chance. And one by one, those doors slammed in her face. Every label said no. Some were polite, others dismissive. To them, she was just another hopeful child in a sea of dreamers. Nashville had seen hundreds like her. Why bet on this skinny girl with big eyes and a guitar? But here's the twist. Instead of breaking her spirit, those rejections hardened it. They carved into her a stubbornness, a resolve that would become the trademark of her career. Most children would have gone home, discouraged. Taylor went home and doubled down. She began practicing guitar relentlessly, writing obsessively, turning pain into poetry. The guitar that changed everything. There's a story that has now become legend. A computer repairman showed her a few guitar chords when he came to fix her family's computer. Those simple chords became her gateway into songwriting. Within months, she wasn't just playing, she was crafting songs. Real songs with structure, with hooks, with emotion. And this is where Taylor set herself apart. Many kids dream of being singers. Few take up the pen. But Taylor understood something profound, even at that age. Music wasn't just about singing someone else's words. It was about telling her story. And her story, raw, unfiltered, emotional, was something only she could give the world. The bold move. Her parents saw it too. They realized their daughter had something extraordinary, something worth taking a risk for. And so, in one of the most pivotal decisions of her life, her family moved from Pennsylvania to Hendersonville, Tennessee, a town just outside Nashville. This wasn't a casual relocation, it was a sacrifice. Her parents uprooted their lives, invested their savings, and essentially bet everything on their daughter's dream. Not every parent would do that, but the Swifts weren't ordinary parents, and Taylor wasn't an ordinary child. This move placed her within striking distance of Nashville's music scene, and soon enough, opportunity knocked. Big Machine and the Beginning. In 2004, Scott Borchetta, a DreamWorks executive about to launch his own label, Big Machine Records, took a chance on Taylor. She was just 14 when she signed with him, Many at the time thought it was a gamble. After all, teen country singers weren't exactly dominating the charts. But Borchetta saw what others didn't: a spark, a relentless drive, and songs that could capture hearts. Taylor's debut single, Tim McGraw, was released in 2006 when she was just 16. It wasn't an overnight explosion, but it was enough to make people stop and notice. The song wasn't flashy. It was simple, heartfelt, and nostalgic. And that was its magic. It didn't sound like a calculated hit. It sounded like a diary entry turned melody. Her self-titled debut album soon followed, with songs like Teardrops on My Guitar and Our Song. These tracks weren't just songs, they were confessions. They carried the vulnerability of a teenager, but the craftsmanship of a seasoned songwriter. Audiences connected instantly, especially young girls who saw their own lives reflected in her words. But what no one knew at the time was that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with storms, reinventions, and revolutions. The price of fame. By 2007 and 2008, Taylor's career was skyrocketing. Awards poured in. Her fan base grew rabidly loyal, calling themselves Swifties. But fame is never free. Behind the scenes, Taylor was navigating the cruel world of high school while living under a spotlight. She was often bullied, labeled weird for chasing music instead of fitting in. In her yearbook, she wasn't the prom queen or the most popular girl. She was the outsider. And yet, she turned that pain into songs. This is one of the most underappreciated aspects of Taylor's story: her ability to take wounds and turn them into art. Where others would have been crushed, she crafted fuel for her career. Every rejection, every heartbreak, every betrayal became raw material. The Fearless Leap. Then came the album that changed everything, Fearless, in 2008. It wasn't just a success, it was a cultural moment. Songs like Love Story and You Belong With Me exploded globally, transcending the country genre. Love Story in particular was revolutionary. Inspired by Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, it flipped the tragic ending into a fairy tale romance. The world couldn't get enough. Taylor wasn't just writing about her own life anymore. She was creating universal stories of love, heartbreak, and hope. Fearless made Taylor Swift a superstar. She was no longer just the country girl with a guitar. She was a crossover icon. And in 2010, Fearless won the Grammy for Album of the Year, making her, at 20 years old, the youngest artist ever at the time to win that award. It was a crowning moment. But even as the spotlight shined brighter, shadows began creeping in. The VMA incident, a defining humiliation. The year was 2009. Taylor had just won the MTV Video Music Award for Best Female Video for You Belong With Me. It should have been a triumphant, joyous night, but instead it turned into one of the most shocking and humiliating moments of her career. As she stood on stage beginning her acceptance speech, rapper Kanye West stormed up, grabbed the microphone, and declared that Beyoncé had one of the greatest videos of all time. The crowd gasped. Taylor stood frozen, a teenager blindsided in front of millions. It was a moment that revealed the cruelty of fame, the way joy can be stolen in an instant, the way public humiliation can scar. For weeks, the media replayed the incident, dissecting it, turning it into a meme. Taylor, still just 19, was forced to navigate the storm. But here's the remarkable part. Instead of letting it define her as a victim, she absorbed it, processed it, and turned it into one of the central storylines of her career, a story of resilience against public humiliation and industry politics. This incident was no small footnote. It set the stage for a decade-long saga between Taylor and Kanye, one filled with betrayals, reconciliations, and renewed conflicts. And it would test Taylor's spirit like nothing else. Beyond Fearless. In the aftermath of Fearless, Taylor didn't retreat. She pushed forward with her third album, Speak Now, in 2010, an album she wrote entirely by herself, as if to prove to the world that she didn't need an army of songwriters to back her. Tracks like Back to December, Enchanted, and Mean showcased her growing maturity. Mean, in particular, was a response to critics who had mocked her voice, her style, her persona. With biting honesty, she sang, "Someday I'll be living in a big old city, and all you're ever gonna be is mean." It wasn't just a song, it was a manifesto of defiance. By now, Taylor had cemented her reputation as not just a singer, but a songwriter who could slice through emotions with surgical precision, and the world was watching as she transitioned from teenage stardom to young adulthood. The hidden struggles, but behind the success there were struggles few saw. Taylor often spoke about the loneliness of fame, the way it distanced her from peers, the way friendships felt fragile under the weight of her celebrity. While millions adored her, she often felt isolated. There was also the constant scrutiny of her personal life. Every relationship, every friendship, every lyric was dissected by tabloids. She was criticized for dating too much, for writing too many breakup songs, for being too calculated. The irony was glaring. A male artist writing about love was celebrated, while Taylor was vilified. This double standard began to chip away at her, planting seeds of self-doubt that would later blossom into some of her darkest periods. And yet, as we stand here in this part of her journey, one thing is clear. Taylor Swift was no ordinary artist. She was a storm gathering strength, a storyteller sharpening her pen, a young woman preparing to fight battles that would not only define her, but redefine the entire music industry. Because what came next, the reinventions, the betrayals, the feuds, the comebacks, would elevate her from star to legend. When Speak Now solidified Taylor Swift as a formidable songwriter, many assumed the story would settle into a predictable rhythm, steady success, more albums, a slow climb into legend. But Taylor Swift's story has never been predictable. Because just as she reached a new peak, the world around her began to change, and with it came storms that would test every fiber of her being. The Red Era: love, heartbreak, and evolution. In 2012, Taylor released Red, an album that marked her boldest experiment yet. Gone was the strictly country label that had defined her. Red was sprawling, messy, ambitious, a kaleidoscope of styles. From the aching All Too Well to the pop perfection of We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, Taylor stretched her wings. But Red was more than just music. It was an emotional battlefield. The album chronicled passionate love affairs and devastating heartbreaks, most notably her highly publicized relationships with Jake Gyllenhaal and others. For the first time, the world wasn't just listening to her songs. They were dissecting them, speculating about the real people behind the lyrics. All Too Well, in particular, became legendary. What started as a simple ballad evolved into a song whispered about with reverence, fans calling it her magnum opus. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was poetry, raw and devastating. And years later, when she released the 10-minute version, it cemented itself as one of the most powerful breakup anthems of all time. But with this newfound emotional depth came criticism. The media mocked her dating life, reducing her artistry to tabloid fodder. Headlines painted her as a serial dater, a manipulator who turned romances into songs. The sexism was blatant, but it stung nonetheless. Taylor, once the darling of critics, found herself under siege. The turning point: pop transformation. By 2014, Taylor was done being boxed in. She had conquered country, flirted with pop, and now she was ready to dive headfirst into it. Enter 1989. The album wasn't just a change in sound, it was a declaration. Synth-pop anthems like Shake It Off and Blank Space dominated the airwaves, showcasing a sharper, wittier Taylor who could parody her own image while delivering chart-topping hits. 1989 was playful yet powerful, ironic yet intimate. Blank Space in particular was genius. For years, tabloids painted her as a love-obsessed man-eater. Instead of denying it, Taylor leaned into the caricature, mocking the stereotype while creating one of the most iconic songs of her career. It was satire wrapped in pop perfection. The risk paid off. 1989 became one of the best-selling albums of the decade, sweeping the Grammys and making Taylor the first woman to win Album of the Year twice. The world now saw her not as a country star, but as a global pop icon. But success is a double-edged sword. For every cheer there was a whisper, and soon whispers became knives. The Kanye feud reignites. Remember the 2009 VMAs? That wound had never fully healed. In 2016, Kanye West released a song called Famous, which included the line, I feel like me and Taylor might still have sex. I made that expletive famous. The lyric shocked fans. Kanye insisted Taylor approved it. Taylor denied it. And then, like gasoline on a fire, Kanye's wife, Kim Kardashian, released edited phone call clips that appeared to suggest Taylor had indeed given her blessing. The internet erupted. Hashtags like Taylor Swift Eyes Over Party trended worldwide. Overnight, Taylor was painted as a liar, a manipulator, a snake. Memes flooded social media. The once beloved pop princess was suddenly the villain. For most, this would have been career suicide. The shame, the backlash, the scale of public hatred, it was overwhelming. Taylor disappeared from the spotlight. No interviews, no paparazzi appearances, just silence. And in that silence, something extraordinary happened. Reputation rising from the ashes. In 2017, Taylor returned with Reputation. The album cover, her name plastered in tabloid fonts as if reclaiming the headlines used against her. The theme, snakes. Her way of owning the insult hurled at her during the backlash. Songs like Look What You Made Me Do dripped with vengeance, a dark reinvention of Taylor Swift. Gone was the wide-eyed innocence. In its place stood a woman scarred, hardened but unbroken. Critics were divided. Some called it too bitter, too angry, but fans understood. It wasn't just an album, it was therapy. It was survival. It was Taylor refusing to be erased. And despite the noise, Reputation broke records, selling millions and launching one of the highest-grossing tours of all time. Taylor had proven once again that she could turn even her darkest hour into triumph. The Lover era, light after darkness. By 2019, Taylor was ready for a new chapter. Lover arrived as a burst of color, a return to warmth and romance after the shadows of Reputation. Songs like Lover and You Need to Calm Down celebrated love, individuality, and acceptance. But behind the pink and glitter, a storm was brewing. Because just as she basked in her newfound happiness, Taylor was about to face the greatest battle of her career, not with a rival artist, not with the press, but with the very system that controlled her music. The Masters controversy, a fight for ownership. Here lies one of the most defining chapters of Taylor Swift's legacy. In 2019, it was revealed that Scooter Braun, a powerful music manager, had acquired Big Machine Records, including the master recordings of Taylor's first 6 albums. To the casual observer, this was business as usual, but for Taylor it was devastating. She had begged for years to own her masters, the original recordings of her work, but was denied. Now, the rights to her life's work had been sold to someone she considered an enemy. In a scathing public statement, Taylor accused Scooter Braun of manipulation and bullying. She declared that her art, her very identity, had been taken from her without consent. The battle wasn't just about money, it was about autonomy, respect, and the rights of artists everywhere. And then, in a move that stunned the industry, Taylor announced she would re-record all of her old albums. It was unprecedented. No major star had ever attempted such a feat. But Taylor wasn't just fighting for herself. She was making a statement. Artists deserve to own their work. The world watched in awe. Fans rallied behind her, vowing to support only Taylor's version of her albums. And when Fearless, Taylor's version, and Red, Taylor's version, dropped, they soared to the top of the charts. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was revolution. The surprise albums, Folklore and Evermore. If 2020 tested the world, it also revealed Taylor's genius. In the middle of a global pandemic, when stadiums were silent and tours were cancelled, she released Folklore. The album was unlike anything she had done before. Quiet, introspective, indie folk inspired. It wasn't designed for radio hits. It was designed for soul. Songs like Cardigan, Exile, and August painted cinematic stories, not just personal confessions. The world was stunned. Critics hailed it as her best work yet. Fans found comfort in its intimacy during a year of isolation. And just when everyone thought she was done, Taylor dropped Evermore, a sister album, 5 months later. 2 masterpieces in less than a year. Who does that? Only Taylor Swift. With these albums, she transcended pop stardom. She became something greater, a cultural storyteller, a modern bard chronicling not just her own life, but the lives of millions through music. The Eras Tour, a global spectacle. By 2023, Taylor embarked on the Eras Tour, a concert spanning her entire discography. It wasn't just a tour, it was a cultural event. Stadiums sold out in minutes, fans traveled across continents, entire cities transformed into Swiftie celebrations. But beyond the glitz, the Eras Tour symbolized something deeper. It was proof that Taylor Swift had survived everything: rejections, humiliations, betrayals, and corporate battles, and emerged not just intact, but stronger than ever. She wasn't just a singer anymore, she was an institution. And before we move deeper into Taylor Swift's extraordinary story, into the sacrifices she made, the people she lost along the way, and the legacy she is still building, here's a quick reminder. If you're enjoying this journey into the life of Taylor Swift, don't forget to subscribe to Legacy Biographies, hit the like button, and share this video with others who love powerful life stories. Also, drop a comment. Tell us one fact you know about Taylor Swift that we didn't cover, or simply share how you felt about this video in just 1 or 2 lines. Now, let's continue. Personal struggles. What the world didn't see. While Taylor dazzled the world on stage, privately she faced battles most never knew. In 2015, her mother Andrea was diagnosed with cancer, a devastating blow to the family. For Taylor, who was extremely close to her mom, it was a reminder that no amount of fame could shield her from life's cruelties. She also grappled with body image issues. In her documentary Miss Americana, Taylor admitted struggling with disordered eating, fueled by constant media scrutiny of her appearance. Behind the smiles and glittering gowns was a young woman fighting to accept herself in a world that never stopped criticizing. These vulnerabilities made her human, and perhaps that's why millions connected so deeply with her, because behind the legend was a girl still learning, still hurting, still growing. The power of reinvention. At this point in her career, Taylor had achieved what few ever could: dominance across genres from country to pop to indie folk. But her greatest strength wasn't just her voice, her lyrics, or her melodies. It was her ability to reinvent herself without losing her core. Every era of Taylor Swift told a story, and each reinvention wasn't just a marketing strategy, it was a survival tactic. She shed skins, embraced new identities, and in doing so, showed the world that change isn't weakness, it's power. From the small-town girl on a Christmas tree farm to a global icon filling stadiums, Taylor Swift had become more than an artist. She was a mirror reflecting our own struggles, heartbreaks, and triumphs. And yet, her story was still far from over. Because in the final act of this journey, we will explore not just the victories, but the ultimate legacy Taylor Swift is carving. The cultural force she has become, the barriers she continues to break, and the inspiration she leaves for generations to come. By the time Taylor Swift entered the 2020s, she'd already lived a dozen lifetimes in the public eye. From the awkward teenager clutching her guitar at county fairs to the global superstar commanding stadiums, she had seen rejection, humiliation, triumph, and reinvention. But the final act of her story, at least so far, goes beyond personal victories. It is about legacy, cultural influence, and the enduring power of an artist who turned her life into history. The voice of a generation. What makes Taylor Swift extraordinary is not simply her sales, her awards, or her record-breaking tours. It is the way her songs have woven themselves into the fabric of people's lives. Think about it. Her lyrics have been quoted in wedding vows, carved into gravestones, tattooed on skin. For millions of fans, her music isn't just entertainment, it's therapy, a soundtrack to their own heartbreaks, dreams, and awakenings. She doesn't just write songs, she writes chapters of her listeners' lives. In an industry often accused of being shallow and profit-driven, Taylor stood out because she dared to be personal, vulnerable, even messy. She gave voice to feelings people couldn't articulate, and in doing so, she became more than an entertainer. She became a confidant. A political awakening. For much of her early career, Taylor avoided politics. She was careful, perhaps too careful, to maintain an image that wouldn't alienate fans. But as the years passed, silence became impossible. In 2018, she broke her political silence with a powerful Instagram post endorsing Democratic candidates in Tennessee and speaking out against discrimination. It shocked the world. Headlines blared, "Taylor Swift gets political." Her voice sparked conversations, mobilized voters, and even influenced voter registration numbers. This shift revealed a deeper side of her legacy. Taylor Swift was no longer just shaping music. She was shaping culture and society. She had realized her voice carried weight beyond melodies. Fighting for artists, the battle over her masters was not just a personal war. It ignited a broader conversation about the exploitation of artists in the music industry. For decades, record labels held ownership of musicians' work, often leaving artists powerless. Taylor's decision to re-record her albums was more than a business move. It was a revolution. She showed younger artists that ownership mattered, that creative control was worth fighting for, that they didn't have to surrender their art to corporate giants. The ripple effects were immediate. More artists began questioning their contracts. Labels felt pressure to renegotiate terms. And suddenly, Taylor Swift wasn't just a pop star. She was a warrior for artistic freedom. The Swift economy. One of the most astonishing impacts of Taylor Swift is economic. The Eras Tour became not just a concert series, but an economic force. Cities hosting her shows reported hotel booms, restaurant surges, even local tourism spikes. Economists dubbed it the Swift effect. Think about that. A singer-songwriter from a Christmas tree farm was now influencing GDP. That level of cultural and financial power is almost unheard of in modern times. Few artists, living or dead, have wielded that kind of influence. And yet, Taylor wore it with grace, often using her success to spotlight charities, donate to fans in need, and support causes close to her heart. Hidden vulnerabilities. But behind the power, there remained vulnerability. Taylor has always been candid about her insecurities, her struggles with body image, her fear of irrelevance. Fame, after all, is fickle. The same crowd that cheers today can turn tomorrow. Her documentary Miss Americana revealed moments of doubt, tears, loneliness. It humanized her in a way that statistics and awards never could. It reminded the world that even the biggest stars carry invisible scars. This duality, immense power on stage, fragile humanity offstage, is perhaps why people feel so deeply connected to her. She is extraordinary, yet relatable, a giant, yet still human. Love and privacy. For years, Taylor's relationships were tabloid obsessions. But in the late 2010s, she shifted. Her long-term relationship with actor Joe Alwyn was kept largely private, away from paparazzi lenses. For once, love wasn't a headline. It was hers to protect. Even their eventual breakup in 2023 reflected growth. Instead of scandal, Taylor handled it with grace. Her music, once again, the medium through which she processed heartbreak. Songs from Midnights hinted at the complexities of love, fame, and vulnerability. In a world that demanded constant access to her private life, Taylor reclaimed control, setting boundaries while still giving her fans honesty through her art. Midnights, a confessional at 2 a.m. In 2022, Taylor released Midnights, an album described as 13 sleepless nights scattered throughout her life. It was intimate, confessional, and dripping with vulnerability. Songs like Anti-Hero laid bare her insecurities, with the now famous line, "It's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me." Fans embraced it instantly. It wasn't just an album, it was a mirror held up to the anxieties of modern life. Taylor once again proved her gift for capturing universal emotions in deeply personal ways. The Eras Tour film. When demand for the Eras Tour tickets broke Ticketmaster and left millions empty-handed, Taylor responded with another innovation, the Eras Tour film. Released in theaters, it became a global box office phenomenon. Swifties filled cinemas, singing and dancing as if they were at the concerts themselves. It was yet another example of Taylor's ability to adapt, to turn obstacles into opportunities, and to deliver her art in ways no one expected. The legacy of Taylor Swift. So what, ultimately, is Taylor Swift's legacy? It is not just her 12 Grammys, her record-breaking albums, or her sold-out tours. It is her resilience in the face of rejection. It is her ability to reinvent without losing authenticity. It is her courage to fight for ownership, to speak for women, for artists, for fans who feel invisible. Taylor Swift's legacy is in every teenager who picked up a guitar after hearing "Teardrops on My Guitar." It's in every fan who cried through "All Too Well" and felt understood. It's in every artist who now demands control of their masters, because she showed them it was possible. She is not merely a pop star. She is a phenomenon, an era-defining force whose influence stretches far beyond music. The cost of greatness. But greatness always comes with a cost. Taylor sacrificed a normal adolescence, traded privacy for scrutiny, endured betrayals and humiliations that might have broken anyone else. She bore the burden of constant reinvention, the weight of being the voice of a generation. And yet, she carried it with grace, turning every wound into a weapon, every scar into a song. Her story reminds us that legends are not born, they are forged. Forged in rejection, in heartbreak, in controversy, in reinvention. Taylor Swift's life is proof that the most powerful art often comes from the most painful places. A living legend. What makes Taylor's story unique is that it is still unfolding. Unlike legends of the past whose stories are complete, Taylor's book is still being written in real time. Every tour, every album, every bold decision adds another chapter. And that is perhaps the most exciting part. We are living in the Taylor Swift era. We are witnesses to history in the making, watching an artist not just reflect culture, but actively shape it. 50 years from now, when people look back on the early 21st century, they will remember Taylor Swift not just for her music, but for the way she captured the spirit of her time. The goosebump ending. So let us return to the question we began with. How did a shy girl from a Pennsylvania Christmas tree farm become one of the most powerful women on earth? The answer is simple yet profound. She believed. When doors slammed, she kept knocking. When mocked, she kept writing. When silenced, she found a louder voice. When her art was stolen, she rebuilt it from the ground up. Taylor Swift is not just a singer. She is a survivor, a warrior, a storyteller, a mirror to our joys and our sorrows. And perhaps that is why her legacy feels eternal. Because in her story, we see our own. We see the awkward teenager inside us, the heartbroken lover, the dreamer who refuses to quit. And we realize that greatness is not about perfection, it's about resilience. So the next time you hear a Taylor Swift song, whether it's a country ballad, a pop anthem, or a folk confession, remember this. Behind every lyric is a girl who turned her diary into history, who turned humiliation into triumph, who turned rejection into revolution. Taylor Swift is not just a modern music phenomenon. She is living proof that no matter where you come from, no matter how many times the world tries to break you, you can rise, reinvent, and write your own destiny. And that will be her ultimate legacy.